Good evening and welcome. My name is Matt Davis, and I'm the Director of Life and Justice Ministries for the Diocese of Camden. Happy to welcome you tonight to our panel discussion on Life and Justice Ministries during the time of COVID-19. Tonight's panel is part of a much larger offering of online retreats, faith conversations, and panel discussions on various points of the Catholic faith that the Diocese has been creating. I want to thank Donna Ottaviano-Britt and Mike Walsh for this invitation to this really wonderful group of online offerings. This is the second episode in a series of panel discussions under the title of Matthew 25 Alive. In the first episode of Matthew 25 Alive, my colleagues at Catholic Charities, Kevin Hickey, Sylvia, and Mary McCusker did a great job of breaking down the connections between Catholic Charities, Catholic social teaching, and Matthew 25. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to do so. It's informative, there's a lot of insight. You can find it on the Diocesan YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with the verses we're referring to in Matthew 25, we're looking specifically at verses 31 to 46, what some theologians call the judgment of nations. In these verses, Jesus is talking to disciples, and the disciples, I always laugh. I can relate to them, that they don't get it sometimes. Jesus has to talk to them and kind of scold them and keep reminding them and teaching them. But here Jesus is talking about the path to salvation, and also avoiding the path to damnation. In these verses, Jesus says, the path to salvation depends on how you've treated the least of these. And then he goes to list who the least of these are. He talks about people who are hungry and thirsty, a stranger, what today we would call an immigrant, people that are naked or ill and in prison, people that are vulnerable, people that may feel isolated, in need, lonely, rejected. And it's kind of crazy, 2,000 years later, we still have people in all those same categories. And with COVID-19, people in those categories are even more vulnerable. So in tonight's discussion for Matthew 25, we're going to hold Matthew 25 kind of the back of our minds while we think about and reflect on Life and Justice Ministries during the time of COVID-19. Now, I'm excited tonight to welcome three wonderful panelists who are going to help us dig deeper into this topic tonight. The first is Andres Arango. Andres is the Bishop's Delegate for Hispanic Ministry and the Director of Evangelization for the Diocese. He's also a leader in the charismatic movement at an international level. Little tidbit, I used to work with his wife, Katia, in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Now I work with Andres in the Diocese of Camden. Andres, I'm thinking to move to Paraguay. Maybe I can work on Katia's sisters down in Paraguay, keep it in the family a little bit. But Andres, thanks for being here, and welcome, Andres.
Thank you so much, Matt, for the invitation. It's a blessing to be here sharing with you and to be, talking to our people in our diocese during this moment, really, to listen what God is telling us. It's a blessing to be with you, Matt.
Great, thank you. Our second panelist is Rosalind Edman. Roz is the leader of her Life and Justice Committee at the Parish of St. Charles Borromeo in Sicklerville. She's very active. She's doing some great work of bringing people together at the parish level in terms of responding to COVID-19. She's one of the great collaborators of my office. So welcome, Roz. Great to have you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And as Andre said, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I really see this as a time to see what the Holy Spirit is drawing the church toward.
Great, I agree. Last but not least, Michael Jordan Laskey, a Jersey guy, a former even blessed South Jersey guy. Mike used to be the director of the office I'm in now, Life and Justice Ministries. Did some really great work while he was here in the diocese. I definitely stand on his shoulders in the work I'm doing now. Mike's currently the senior communications manager for the Jesuit conference in Washington, D.C. Mike, welcome, and welcome virtually back to South Jersey.
Oh, it's so good to be here, making some Jersey connections. I was sharing before we went on that since we moved to Maryland a year ago, I haven't had a good sandwich or good pizza since then, which is of deep sadness to me, but I'm so happy to be connecting with some good South Jerseyans again.
We'll send you that once, as long as the post office stays open, man, we can send that to you.
Put that right in.
Okay. So to start our conversation tonight, I think it's good to remember that Life and Justice Ministries, like any ministry in the church, begins with our faith and our love in God. And it's really this grounding in faith and love of God that helps keep Life and Justice Ministries unique and vibrant and hopeful and spirit-led. So this is for the panel. As social distancing begins to really stretch on, what are you personally doing to stay grounded in your faith and our faith community during this time? And what advice can you give those watching to stay grounded in their faith during this time? Andres, I want to start off with you. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Matt, thanks. I was mentioned a few weeks ago that I hope that in a few years or for the rest of our life, we are going to say that the best Lent was the Lent in 2020. Because sometimes for Lent, we do all these promises, to fasting, sacrifice, to pray more. And very easily, we forget about that for the activity in our life. And I think, during the Lent that we just have in 2020, I think for me personally, was an opportunity to have more moments of prayers, to do sacrifice, probably was imposed, but we were not doing something that we would like to do. I hope that for the rest of our life, we can say was one of the best Lents in our life. And now that we are in the Easter season, I hope that also we can say it was a really, really great Easter, that doesn't matter the difficulties that we have, doesn't matter the pandemic that we are living right now, we are increasing our faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, in the risen Jesus. And I want to say, like personally, especially speaking about community, about the domestic church. For me, it has been something to really go what it means to have a domestic church. Because we have social distance, but in our home, with my wife, with my two beautiful twin daughters, has been a moment for us to grow together in our relationship with God. I remember so many times in the past, I used to say, I want to have more time with my wife. I want to have more time with my kids. I'm so busy, evenings, weekends, our job. And now I think it's an opportunity to have our time. It's an opportunity to grow together as a family. It doesn't matter that I feel, I was telling you, I feel more busy right now at home because I need to do the homework with my daughters, to work from home, more busy. But I think at the same time, I enjoy each moment. I want to say, to be in quarantine, as most of us, we are in our homes, has been a moment to spend a little more time in prayer, but more that community prayer. And what I mean by community prayer is about my family. Every day is very interesting with my daughters. We watch the Mass on TV every day. And has a really good catechetical opportunity also, because when we go to the church, they cannot ask questions, or if they ask you, we say, when we finish and at the end we forget. But now she can ask any question. Hey, Dad, what the priest is doing this, what he means about this. So I think has been a really nice catechetical opportunity also to do the faith of my daughters. Very sad because they were supposed to do the first communion in May, now has been postponed. But at the same time, I remember Bishop Sullivan one day in his home, he told your daughter, don't worry, she's going to make it. We don't know when, and I think I came home, I told her that, and now she's very excited. I want to say that, and also finally, an advice, especially I am immigrant in this country. I'm from Colombia. I don't have family here, just my wife, my daughters, but the rest of my family, they're Florida, Colombia, Paraguay, and has been very interesting because has been a very nice opportunity to be connected with them. I think I have been speaking more to them than in the past. And just to put an example, usually every week, we have a Zoom meeting, but it's not just a Zoom meeting. So, we laugh, we tell jokes, everything, but we finish with a moment of prayer. I think I have never do that in the past with my whole family. And now some people that probably they are not very near, going to church frequently, but now they want to pray. And it has been a really good opportunity to pray together as family. Just I want to invite my brothers and sisters who are immigrant in this country, who has family in other place, to that really good opportunity. And I mentioned a lot of things. I'm sure my Laskey is doing really good things, what to do in family, and those advice has been really great.
Great, thanks, Andres. That reflection on the domestic church and staying connected of your extended family. Any thoughts on this, Roz?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate at St. Charles. We started having live streamed masses long before COVID-19. And so they're very well done. And we have daily mass. We have 3 o'clock devotions every day, a holy hour on Friday. We have the 4:30 mass Saturday and the 9 on Sundays. And what is really nice on the Facebook version, because we have it both on the website and the Facebook, on Facebook, as people tune in as they're going, before Mass starts, everybody's saying, hello, good morning, how are you? Would you pray for this? There's a real sense of community doing that. And I read someplace that one of the dangers of this could be that people tend to look for other churches, et cetera, and maybe necessarily, but there's something wonderful about knowing that you can still be connected with your own parish community. I find that very, very important, and I find it very helpful. The other thing that I have found helpful is I've been part of for a long time a small faith sharing group. And so we just moved it to Zoom. And we meet every Thursday, and we have our faith sharing. And as a suggestion for others, it struck me, this might be a really good time for people to start faith sharing groups. You know, get very simple, get some of your friends together, get on Zoom. There are lots of materials out there for faith sharing groups. It would be a great way to start and to come together weekly. And again, the small church that builds the large church. You know, I think there's something, I would love to see parishes have more and more small faith sharing groups. Sometimes hard to start, but this could be an opportunity for some people to do that.
Great ideas.
One other thing, I had to laugh when Andres was talking about Lent being a good Lent, and I had come across a lot of churches, particularly our non-Catholic Christian churches, have big marquees outside. They put things on it. And one of them said, "But I never expected to have to give up all this for Lent."
Thank you for sharing, Roz. I have to say, my wife and I, just watching our Sunday Mass live stream, we go to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and that has really meant a lot to us to kind of connect and, see our priests. We love the music. The head of the music is a guy named Mauricio. We go to Mass in Spanish, and he just got a great voice, and he sings the guitar. We found a lot of comfort just in that Sunday Mass, sitting together on the couch with our son and listening and still feeling connected. So it's been a blessing. Mike, any thoughts you got down there in Maryland about this?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to answer this one. This one is hard. I think and I'm reflecting on it, we have not done a good job at this in our house. We have 3 kids who are 4, 2, and 5 months, and going to Mass with them beforehand was it was never something we really looked forward to, because it was going to be corralling the entire time, is making sure that they're, again, seated as best as possible and not stomping on goldfish into the floor and into the pews. And so my feeling around not going to Mass has been relief more than sadness. And I've had to sit and reflect with that. And that is true. But also thinking too that Christianity and faith practice, we don't show up week after week when we were going because it was easy, or even because it was providing some sort of superficial nourishment, but because we believe it's important. And then even when you're not feeling it, we still show up. That's a big part of being Catholic. And so it's been a reminder of that now that we haven't been showing up really, and there's the kind of comfort, the kind of just, I can relax and Sunday is not stressful anymore. That's just been an important reminder for us. And we're realizing that. And we're thinking, okay, even starting this coming Sunday, how can we start bringing some more of this home? Because it is a great catechetical moment. It's a reminder that church is not just the 4 walls. The walls are important and the community is important, but the church is us. We are the church, and we now kind of have some more responsibility for taking some ownership of that in our own daily lives. And so like that, yeah, it's important for us. We are seeing that, like our 4-year-old especially, she's getting really curious about Jesus. She wants to hear, tell me a story about Jesus, Daddy. She wants to know. We pray together at night, we pray before meals, but it feels like we haven't been the best at bringing some of the Sunday experience, the connection to the broader church community there. I think part of that too is that we haven't registered at a parish. We had started going to one here, and now I finally put in our online form to get us registered, and because to maybe feel more connected to that community. So yeah, that has been a real challenge. Like, to be honest about, like, that this time it's hard. And Pope Francis talked about this, saying, hey, we have to be creative and we use these online things, but we have to make sure that our faith doesn't just become a virtual faith only, especially when we're able to kind of come together again. So it's important reflection for us. I will say, in terms of our own spiritual practice, I work for the Jesuits now. One thing I love about the Jesuits is their tradition of Ignatian spirituality and following in the footsteps of St. Ignatius and what he called his friends in the Lord, those who started the Jesuits. And their biggest prayer practice, daily prayer practice, is what's called the examen of consciousness. Essentially, it's kind of looking back over the course of your day and trying to notice where you saw God at work, or maybe where you didn't see God at work, or where you missed God, or where you were really challenged, and to do that from a place of gratitude. So to kind of practice gratitude and practice noticing God in your day. And when I'm in times in my life when I'm practicing the examen and praying that and like reviewing my day in prayer at the end of the day, I find then that like the next day I'm noticing God in like the cardinal that swoops by and lands on a branch nearby when we're out in the backyard. Like, I notice God more frequently as he's making himself known to me, because I'm doing that kind of daily inventory of God. So I do think the examen, and then again, there are great like prayer cards for the examen, is a really wonderful tool for kind of collecting in the midst of this craziness. There's so much stress and stuff going on, like making sure we're finding ways to notice God in the day-to-day.
Great stuff, Mike. Our son is 6 months old, and he's just starting now to cry really loud. So like, man, this is nice right now. We're just sitting on the couch, and we're not worried about him, yelling in the ear of our neighbor at Mass. So, I can relate, and we'll be relating much more soon to that balance of the kids and Mass and how to do that well. But thank you for sharing. I also want to add that I've started doing the examen more recently. My son is sleeping more at night. So now at night, I'm not just putting my head down and falling asleep. I'm actually using the examen. So I think it's a great thing what you referenced, Mike, taking a few seconds at the end of the day, or whenever you have a chance, and just reviewing the day and looking for, where's God's grace has been, where's the little moments of God's beauty. So I want to affirm that it's been really helpful for me as well. Any other thoughts the panelists have on this? All right, a second question for consideration. So we just talked about Life and Justice Ministries being about love of God and being connected to God. But following the great commandments of Jesus, it's not just love of God, it's also about love of neighbor. And we can see in Matthew 25 that, neighbors that are particularly vulnerable are people we need to be concerned about. So in this office, Life and Justice, we support a Catholic consistent ethic of life, which is concerned about the people that is talked about in Matthew 25, people that are poor and hungry, immigrants, people sick and in prison. But we go beyond that too. There's other people in need. I'm thinking now about pregnant women, the unborn children, elderly, people with addictions. With the virus, we've got people who are vulnerable. They're working in healthcare and food productions and supermarkets and delivery. Millions of people have lost their jobs or in need. We've got families at home now with children trying to balance out life and school and work. So a lot of people in challenging situations right now. A lot of people are hurting right now. So to the panel, how can we love our neighbor and show solidarity with people who are vulnerable in need during this time? Roz, you want to start us? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was thinking about that in terms of, I think there are 3 levels. We have those in our immediate parish boundaries, let's say. And our parishes vary very much. Some of us are in parishes that have a lot of poverty in them, or a lot of immigrants in them, or other parishes are more affluent and don't have that. And so we all have different kind of situations to deal with. We also have the level, where we have so many people nationally who are in trouble, difficulty, and then worldwide. And so starting at the parish level, in our own parish, maybe I could talk about that. And in our own parish, we're probably, we don't have a lot of poor in the parish. I understand our St. Vincent de Paul Society mainly, many of the clients are not parishioners. And I think this is true of St. Vincent de Paul throughout the diocese and probably throughout the country. They serve all people, just as Catholic Charities, by regardless of race, creed, religion, etc. So our Life and Justice group has decided that we wanted to do something. What could we do in regard to COVID-19 in our area? And we joined forces with our St. Vincent de Paul conference, and this has been very helpful. Very, very helpful to everybody. The first thing we did, we decided that it would be helpful to see if we could get people to donate money in the parish toward the purchase of grocery store gift cards. And these would be for parishioners who usually wouldn't be going to St. Vincent de Paul, to the pantry, who wouldn't need that, but who, because of the virus, are out of work or furloughed and are beginning to have some difficulties financially. And so we put a thing on our website and on our Life and Justice website requesting donations. We very quickly had $2,300 donated in small and larger donations. But then we were in touch with someone who had spoken to our Life and Justice group at one point, a young woman who is herself an immigrant, and she had come to speak about her experiences and so on, and she contacted someone on our committee and said, I am aware of at least 10 families of immigrants who they do not speak English. A number of them are undocumented, and as a result, they're very fearful of going out to seek help. And can you do anything about this? So we talked to our to our St. Vincent de Paul Society, and we said, well, we need people who can speak Spanish to be able to help these people. So 2 of our Life and Justice people who do speak Spanish worked with St. Vincent de Paul, and they set up an additional helpline for St. Vincent de Paul that would be just Spanish speaking. And these 2 people became the people who would answer that phone and deal with these Spanish speaking people. And then we had a number of other people we recruited in the parish who spoke Spanish, who would be at the pantry to work with the people when they would come with their needs. And so we have served those 10 families and will continue to. And so this was I thought a really good thing in one of the areas where you have people who are in need, but perhaps do not speak the language.
Great, thanks, Roz. I love the, one neat thing Roz did was join of other people in the parish, kind of coming together. The more people, the better. And then trying to respond to a specific need they discovered. So I just thought it was a great example, Roz. Any thoughts, Andres or Mike?
Yeah, if you can go back in your mind to like the evening of March 11th. So that was like the Wednesday night. I remember I was playing pickup basketball and came off the court and looked at my phone and saw that things were starting to go crazy here, right? Like it was the night that Tom Hanks announced that, he had COVID-19 and his wife, Rita. And then the basketball player, Rudy Gobert, who plays for the team in Utah, he announced he had it. They shut down basketball. Everything kind of started that night. And for me, that night, it was like, oh, wow, everyone is getting this. This is cutting across all sectors, right? That you're not going to be able to hide from this the way that you can hide, like the wealthy can hide from other things, maybe other social ills. But then you're seeing what's happening is that the impact on communities that are already marginalized has been so much worse. And Matt, you mentioned that. If you look, I was looking at this one tweet, kind of looking at data across the country, talking about, it was a sociology professor saying, looking at the US, the top 10 clusters of outbreaks are in prisons, meat packing plants, which again are kind of low income jobs, and a Navy battleship. We saw that. The next 10, prisons, meat packing plants, nursing homes. The 10 after that, and the 10 after that, prisons, meat packing plants, nursing homes. right? These are people who have often been kind of pushed to the side already. What Pope Francis talks about, our throwaway culture, that people who we kind of forgotten, pushed to the side, or black or brown folks who are working in meatpacking places and in prisons, where we know prison populations too already are skew poor and communities of color. So we see that all of that is true, that the way that the virus is affecting people in communities is really kind of hurting those communities the most. And so that should raise some alarms for us. We're seeing a lot of the inequality that already existed being kind of laid bare even more so. And so, yeah, that's some big existential questions for us as a country, that when people are losing their jobs, they're often losing their healthcare because we've tied our healthcare to our jobs, despite like the church is teaching that healthcare is a human right. So we're noticing all of these issues that are there and percolating, and maybe it's a chance to kind of address some of them. The trick with them, like responding, it's amazing to hear from Roz that all this stuff that their parish has done, it's so hard because we're not able to do much in person. And so sometimes that can make us feel like, how do we do anything? So there's obviously been like outpouring of donations, which is great. I think one thing that we can do that's really important, we're seeing right now, like we're seeing how are our state and our federal governments responding? What are things they're putting in place to help protect the most vulnerable? And our faith calls us to those places too, both to feed the hungry, but then also to work to change the system so that people aren't hungry anymore, or that people have access to what they need to not just survive, but to thrive and to live the life that God would want for them. So I think like ways that we can be informed about what's going on in governments, and then use email, use phone call, reach out to those offices of our legislators and say, I'm a person of faith from this community. You represent me. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about the response, we're not just talking about those, again, who are already at the top, but we're thinking really about those communities that are most vulnerable, that have been hit in a disproportionate way, and we're making sure they're cared for in any kind of legislation we pass or any kind of relief package we have. So again, I think it's a chance when if we're not leaving the house to go serve at a soup kitchen, though I know some people are doing that, but if we're kind of at home, like, hey, look up who my congressman is, who my senators are, who my state reps are, and let me get in touch with them to make my voice heard. That's a really important part of our faith as well.
I'd like to jump right in on that, because our Life and Justice ministry that we started at St. Charles initially was started mainly for education and advocacy. We decided that the parish had a lot of direct service things through St. Vincent de Paul, the Interfaith Hospitality Network, etc. And so our main focus was all the people that good-meaning people who just do not know what the church teaches or how to go about being advocates. And so we set up a website where we put up action alerts about things to be, ways and places where people can go to contact their legislators to make a difference. So I strongly agree with that and support that, because these are the things, like, again, in our parish where we're saying, well, we don't have that much direct service needed right now, at least so far that we're seeing in terms of COVID-19. There's tremendous need out there. One of the things you said, Mike, the people who are in, so many of the people who are in what we're calling essential jobs, who have to go to work, are the low income people. And they're the people who are exposing themselves to the virus. And if they get sick, they often do not have the health care, as you said, or the way to protect themselves. So there are tremendous needs nationwide, in terms of people who are suffering terribly. And so, yes, one quick suggestion, if you go on the USCCB, United States Council of Catholic Bishops website, they have a whole section of advocacy. And you can just Google it and you'll find it, and ways to contact your legislators.
Great, thank you, Roz. Andres, any thoughts? Or
Yeah, no first, thank you, Mike, for that advice about advocacy, and Rose for all the things that you and other parties are doing for the, marginalized community. I think one temptation that we can have right now, I think before this, a lot of us, we were already like in a bubble, You know, we are just in our family, our community. And I think now it's worse because now we are thinking, okay, how am I going to protect myself? How am I going to protect my family? And I think a big temptation right now is that we, you know, are more, you know, just thinking about us. And you were mentioning Rose and my, you know, when we talk about social distance, when we talk about stay home, we know a lot of our brothers and sisters, for them, it's impossible to do that. For them, they have to go to war, you know. We are privileged, you know, we are in our home, working from home, receiving our salary, we have our benefits. I speak with my brothers and sisters, and I'm going to speak especially about the Latino community, but not just the Latinos, you know, a lot of the immigrant community, our brothers and sisters, African Americans. But I speak a lot with my brothers and sisters from Latin America. And, you know, some of them, they live here and they live in an apartment, 10, 12 people, 3, 4 families, you know, they are more exposed and they cannot stay home. They need to go to work. You know, they were not receiving the checks for the government because a lot of them, they don't have documents. If they don't work, they don't have nothing to eat. We know a lot of our people, you know, they work in hospital, you know, cleaning the hospital, not just the doctor, the nurses, but cleaning all these places. And of course, a lot of our people has been, you know, with this illness and struggling also, you know, economically in that situation. I want to mention that we need to be aware, and we hope that this is going to move us forward because the impact is not only now, what is going to be happening with all these families, the separation of families. You know, I was just reading the news, yesterday, there are planes going to South America packed of people being deported, you know, being separated from their families here. And I think it's not just the economical situation, but also the struggling about the separation of families in this moment. The first thing that I want to mention is that in some way we don't be concentrating our own bubble. You were talking, you know, Matt, about, you know, Matthew 25. You know, I'm from the Charismatic Renewal, and that text always impacted me. Because Jesus didn't say, hey, come to the kingdom of heaven because you were preaching, you were praying for healing, you were speaking in tongues. No, he said, come because I was hungry and you gave me food. I was in prison and you were to visit me. I was an immigrant, you know, and you accept me in your community. And with Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, you know, when he dedicated all the chapter about the social dimension of evangelization, and he's very clear, we are not going to evangelize the poor, the immigrant. When we go to them, we are going to find Jesus and we are going to be evangelized for them. Matthew 25, we are not doing that for them. We need to find Jesus in them. The first thing I want to mention is please to be aware that I'm not far away. You know, here in South Jersey, 1/3 of the population are Latinos. All of our parishes, they have Latinos. I'm sure all of your parishes, they have people that they don't have documents. The most frequent question that we are receiving this day in my office is, if I don't have documents, I go to a food pantry, they are going to give me food. And the answer right away is yes. You know, they are not going to ask you if you have documents, especially the Catholic food pantries, what Catholic Charities is doing. So I want to recommend all the leaders that are listening to us. You know, thank you to Matt and to Catholic Charities and St. Vincent of Paul. So we put together a list of different resources. If you go to our website, camdendiocese.org, if you don't speak, you know, English in the Ministerio Hispano page, you are going to find all these resources. I want to say, you know, you leaders, probably as Mike mentioned, we cannot go out, but hey, we know a need in the community, where to refer them. You know, these parishes, they are doing this, they are going to give you food, doesn't matter what is your challenge right now. And the final thing that I want to mention is, I see this, you know, I want to speak, you know, my brother, he lives in Florida, but, you know, he just got married in December, but he lives very near to my parents. And of course, my parents are high-risk population. And they are simple things. My brother, he is like watching over there. They cannot put a feed outside their home. He's saying, Mom, you need something, just call me. I'm going to go right away to buy that. And I think that example of my brother is, hey, probably we have a neighbor that we know is in a very risk, pregnant women, what we can do. Sometimes we can need to go to the supermarket to buy something. Hey, you need something, simple things that really is to think about the others.
Great ideas. I'm thinking of the bishops have something called the 2 feet of love in action, which I really love, which is the 1 foot is charity and helping meet people's immediate needs. And I think, Andres talking about help a neighbor. Some of our life and justice committees have been calling seniors in their parish and people that live alone and just checking into how they're doing. Roz helping form this committee of people to help some of the Hispanic families in their area. So that's like that charity. We need that. And then Mike spoke about the justice part, which is kind of bigger picture, advocacy. We don't want to just feed people who are hungry. We want to come up with a world where people aren't hungry. I was thinking of the USCCB Justice for Immigrants campaign as an advocacy, just saying, hey, immigrants are part of the solution in responding to COVID-19, so they need to be receiving support and health care and things like that as well. So I think that 2 feet of love and action is a good way to think, responding to immediate needs, but also thinking bigger picture, how do we look at some things systemically to make the world better for everyone. Any other thoughts from the panel on this?
I think when you're both talking, I was reminded of this interview Pope Francis gave addressed to the English-speaking world. And he said, now's the time for seeing. It's time to see the poor, especially those on the margins. And he talked about how often those who are marginalized, pushed to the edges, kind of like they're not visible. They're not at the center of our discourse or our minds. Andres talking about our own bubbles. And when a virus is coming after everyone, that temptation really to just, form that bubble around ourselves and look only inward. But yeah, that message from Pope Francis, again, it's time to see, and then to think about how do we come out of this and build a world where people are not pushed aside so much.
Great. As Catholics, we're people of both the resurrection and the cross. In our Catholic faith, we're always balancing that out, that there's suffering and there's resurrection. Something I love about our faith is, we believe whenever we're suffering and people are bearing crosses, that God's with us, God's accompanying us, and God's helping us trying to find light in the midst of that darkness. So the panelists, given that, what do you think the church can learn during these difficult moments we're in now? And what can we do to find light from this challenging time as hopefully we soon at some point start to move past and get beyond the virus? So where's the light? What can we learn?
I'll shout at once.
Yes.
I think that my hope would be that we will begin to have more of a global view, a global realization of our brothers and sisters. Solidarity is one of the principles of Catholic social justice, and it says all our brothers and sisters, globally. And I fear sometimes that in our country we're becoming so focused only America first, and this is not the Catholic Christian way of looking at things. And so I'm hoping that we can begin to look out, as Pope Francis says, go to the peripheries, go out to the people who are in need. Even in our country, 1 in 5 families now, statistically, is food insecure. Mm. And I read the other day that they expect after the virus is over, even because of the downturn, the economic downturn worldwide, that probably there will be double the number of people starvation in the world. I think they said it could reach 230 million people, not just hungry, starving, throughout the world. So we have to, as a church, go out. We have to learn to care about the least among us. We have to. that's one thing. I would hope that the light at the end of the tunnel might be that we've seen in the darkness a broader picture of how much suffering there is, and that we can bring about a resurrection.
Yeah, Ross, I've been thinking about that. Like, is it going to be a chance to grow solidarity because we see how connected we are and how, like, hey, this one virus that started in one place went around the world, and we are really not disconnected. We are part of this one family. Or will we have the tendency toward even more isolation, that kind of very, defensiveness that we talked about too? I think it's probably not either or, again, in that case, but kind of a both and thing. So I think that, yeah, that's up to us as folks in the church to think about how do we kind of move the needle toward more solidarity, knowing that there's going to be also this pull toward even more isolation and less connection. So yeah, thinking of ways that we can do that, continue to do that, will be really important.
Great. Any thoughts, Andres?
Yeah, one thing that we hope that we can later, particularly the church here in the United States. I come from Latin America, and in Latin America we have this concept that the parish, talking about the parish, is a community of communities. In Latin America, all the things doesn't happen in the parish facilities. I think Mike was speaking about that in the beginning. I think here in the US we have that tendency that everything happened in the church facilities. The worship, the group, the schools. In Latin America, we came from a different concept. A parish is a community of communities. The things happen in your neighbor during the week, and we come together to the Sunday celebration. And I hope right now this is moving us, the concept of the church here in the US, really to think more about, hey, we are a community of communities. And now we don't know how it's going to be the future of the masses in our parishes, but probably for a while it's not going to be the same. That's how we can build in that sense to be a community of communities. And I think Ross was mentioning in the beginning this thing about faith-sharing groups, small Christian communities, beginning from our home, but also in our neighbors, what we can do to grow together as a neighbor in our relationship with God. I'm talking about that of Christian. It's not just our relationship with God, but our relationship with our brothers and sisters. I hope that the church will start to begin really at the first Christian communities. When we look in the Acts of the Apostles, they have everything in common. Nobody suffered. How we can learn from that, really to build that community. I would say it's not easy, but I hope that we are learning from this. I think one of the things that we are learning is, like, to be a Catholic is not just to go to the Sunday Mass. And now, I don't know who one of you mentioned, now every Sunday, we have several options. Hey, we are going to watch the Mass from the bishop, or the Mass from my parish, or the Mass from this very popular, priest in the US. And I think we have several options. But I think also the people is looking for other things. Right now, how we can use, I think we need to be very creative, very open to the dynamic of the Holy Spirit. How we can use also, all these technological tools that we have, not just to worship, but to really to bring consolation, to be very dynamic, to provide people resources that they can dignify their life. I hope we learn from this, that in the future we move to be more, a community of communities. And as Mike mentioned, we are the church. We are the church. It's not just the church facilities.
Something, Matt, that has been on my mind too is during this period when we are isolated at home and going forward, we don't know what it's going to look like, what church is going to look like going forward. I mean, are we still going to be small numbers at church, or some of us who have underlying conditions, whatever, going to continue to stay at home? How do we keep our church communities close to one another? Let me see if I can explain this a little more clearly. I guess what I'm thinking is, we all are sharing in the liturgies in our, Mass, and we've been involved with our the Life and Justice and St. Vincent de Paul. But another question I would have, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Someone just came in, it distracted me, I'm sorry. I've been thinking about how can we get more people in the parish involved in helping those in need, not just this committee, this ministry, or that. And there are so many people, as we've mentioned, the elderly who are home alone need to be contacted. We talked about phone calls. I was at a meeting Matt had of other social justice groups, and some parishes are sending out graduation congratulations to all the graduates in their parishes. You know, this, in other words, not just the people who are needy that we've been talking about, but there's also a need to be in communication with the whole parish. We need to communicate with our parishioners, and the pastor can't do it all, you know, but I was thinking, if every ministry, and we have God knows how many ministries in our parish, suppose every leader of every ministry at least was contacting everyone in their ministry, keeping in touch, and then saying, what can we do? You know, what else can we do? I went online, and the Archdiocese of Cincinnati has a wonderful website that lists all sorts of things that parishes can do for those in need, but also to keep one another active and involved. And I think this is important because at the end of this, you know, a lot of people are, as we've talked about, are going to be kind of closed in. You know, how can we currently keep people very involved and active? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think to me it makes me think about, so we have this Matthew 25 gospel passage we're thinking about and reflecting on, and how Jesus tells us, hey, when it comes time for salvation, this is how you'll be judged, is really how well you were reaching out with compassion and building a more compassionate world. And then thinking, Rob, how do we get people doing this? How do we shape our parishes? Let them be formed by Matthew 25. And if our parish is more reflected Matthew 25, and not just a ministry for a few on this side, as you're saying, Ross, but for everyone, that this is at the gospel call for all of us as disciples, this work of healing the planet, of working to make sure people are cared for and can live the life God wants for them. How do we bring everyone into that? So again, it's not just left for a few. And so, what would a parish that is really beautifully shaped and formed by the call from Matthew 25 look like? And I think part of the danger when we get into this too, and I find myself doing it, is we come off as scolding almost, hey, have you seen Matthew 25? I'm going to use Matthew 25 as a metaphorical 2x4, and I'm going to smack you on the head with it and say, if you're not doing this, then you're not being a disciple. No, that's probably not the way Jesus would do it, or what he was talking about, even though there's urgency there. It's, hey, we have this privilege. We have this opportunity to work with God to make it closer to his dream for how the world should be. What an opportunity that is. What a blessing we all have in front of us, this chance to put our faith into action by making our community a more just place where more people are included, where fewer people are forgotten or pushed aside. What a great privilege that is. What a great way to put our faith into action. So I try to reframe it that way when I feel tempted to come at you with the Matthew 25 gospel.
Another aspect of that is, there's always the concern about the youth who are leaving the church. And youth are anxious to get involved in social justice issues. So parishes that can involve their youth in some of these issues, very critical, very helpful.
Great, all great points. I'm thinking back to the first question, which is, it starts with God. I think maybe Andres mentioned, feeling, and my wife and I feel sometimes, right, ourselves is, we have a new baby, take care of our family, and there can be that pull to just kind of be very narrow in who you're thinking about. But, by staying connected to God, and then, looking at things like Matthew 25, and say, hey, we got to open ourselves up. It's not just about us. So I think that this kind of all integrates together, that by staying connected to God, we stay connected to Jesus, and Jesus is very clear of, our concerns, our arms are open, and it's really for every person, for youth, for the elderly, people that are ill, people in prison, immigrants, it's really that heart, the heart for everyone. And I think God gives us a big heart. I've always loved about the Hispanic community. I always feel like they're very big-hearted people. So I'm always like, God, just give me a big heart where, I'm not leaving groups of people or people out. I'm just always being expanded. My heart's always being opened to love, because I'm convinced, and if it's not true, I'm in a lot of trouble with my faith. I'm convinced God loves us all, has that big heart for us all. So I'm hoping, one of my hopes for this is that we have that big heart for all people in response to this virus. Any final words or thoughts from our panelists you want to share?
I do. I think, like, as we're talking here in May, just like another thing to keep in mind too is that, like, other injustices that might not be directly connected to the crisis are there, and I think are kind of losing some attention. It's important for us to keep those in mind, and especially my heart is just with the family of Ahmaud Arbery, who was the young man who was killed by vigilantes in Georgia, a young black man killed by these white vigilantes. And we don't know a lot about that yet as we're talking, but clearly there's continues to be real issues of systemic racism and things we need to continue grappling with as a country. That story, even though it's a few months old when we're talking, was kind of forgotten about until videos came out, because I think all the oxygen in the room taken up by coronavirus. So I just think, like, there are those other issues, the protection of the unborn, working for that, in our community, working again to make sure domestic violence cases, which are connected to coronavirus, are, women feel safe, especially in their homes and in our communities. That, again, there are these other issues that we can't forget about when we're thinking about this holistic Matthew 25 vision.
Great. Any final words, Andres?
Yeah, I would say I think Rose mentioned about this concept of solidarity, and I think especially I'm coming as an immigrant. I want to invite everyone, not just to think about ourselves, not just to think about our country. We know that this is hitting very hard right now, other places around the world. Probably they don't have the resources that we have here in the US, and I think it's very important, not just to think about ourselves, but other people in other parts of the world. And I especially want to invite everyone. I'm sure we are surrounded for immigrants here in South Jersey. And plus the suffering that they are experiencing here, they are also experiencing the suffering that they don't know what is happening with their families. They don't know how their families are going to survive in other parts of the world, Latin America, Africa, other places. I want to invite, probably we cannot have that big impact, especially in a personal way, but I think through our prayers to do that and to trust in God that He can provide also for all people that are in this moment very separated of their families.
Thank you, Andres. Roz, can you bring it home for us?
Well, it's been wonderful being able to discuss all of this and to focus on these tremendous needs that there are. But thank God for our faith, because we know that, as you said, there is a resurrection. And I have this saying I always say, may all of our doing come from our being in Him.
Love it.
I think that.
Amen.
I'll leave it at that.
I think that's a great way to close it off. May all of our doing be in Him.
Come from our being in Him.
I want to thank our three panelists, Andres and Roz and Mike, for really bringing alive this episode 2 of Matthew 25 Alive and breaking down life and justice ministries during the time of COVID-19. I know for me personally, it's been a very enlightening and really energizing conversation, and I know it will be for the people that are watching as well. Extra special thanks to Mike Walsh and Donna Ottaviano-Britt for all their good and hard work to keep producing programs for the diocese, to keep us engaged and growing our faith while being at home and looking at things online. And thanks to all of you that are watching during this time of COVID-19. May God bless you and your families and your loved ones and all those suffering and in need, both here locally and around the world. Thanks for joining us. Take care and good night.